Hello guys, welcome back to John HD Gaming, and in this episode, I'd like to showcase my Swedish deck. This is a pure Swedish deck without any specific bonuses, and as a result I can get access to all of the variants. Now, we can get a fair amount of activation points, but not as high as the other Scandinavian countries if I remember correctly. And one good point about the Swedish deck is that the tanks are pretty heavy. As you can tell, for 45 points you get a front armor of 10. That's pretty awesome, I would say. And for the price of 75 you get 13 front armor, but you would be able to tell that the AP power of these vehicles are not amazing. They are far inferior to those of the Abrams, for example. But these guys are really strong. They can take a lot of beatings, take a lot of hits. So use these guys to hold your enemy's attention while you deal damage with, let's say, your infantry, or perhaps your other vehicles, or maybe your planes, and so on and so forth. So right, let's get back to business. Let's talk about logistics. As usual, do bring in some resupply vehicles and bring a armored CV. Do not bring a unarmored CV unless, well, there is no unless. Never bring in unarmored CVs because they will get destroyed very easily in one hit. Now, bringing a fair bit of infantry, I find the Swedish infantry to be pretty decent, I must say. I like the car good stuff that these guys use. High accuracy, high AP power. Definitely got to use these guys. And these other guys over here, also ATGM kind of squads. Now these guys are ATGM as well. So as far as you can tell, there is a lot of good stuff, good infantry over here. They can take on infantry as well as vehicles. This squad over here is against good against helicopters and aeroplanes. These are the AA squads. However, I can only bring in limited amount of them because you can see you can only bring one squad of them, so bring as much as you can. Now these guys with worth 10 points are mainly the sort of main bulk of your infantry. That's why you can bring in 16 of them. Now these guys can bring in 32 of them. Basically the 10 points are slightly cheaper, so just bring as much as you can. You can tell that the sort of the carriers that I bring in are armored, in fact heavily armored. You can see the armor, the front armor of 4 and side armor of, let's say, 3 and back armor of 2. So these guys are heavily armored. So for the price of 40, what I want to do is I'm going to use these carriers and push straight into the enemy front lines and get a foothold while my tanks continue to rush in from the sides and make a push, make a sort of strong landing. So make good use of these Swedish vehicles. They are very heavily armored. Use them to your advantage. Now for the support, I'm going to bring in some AA. These guys are good against the aircraft and helicopters. I like the accuracy, I like the HE power, but I do not really like the range. I find the range pretty limited. I would like a longer range, but for the price of 35, I guess these guys are a decent trade-off. As far as I can tell, there are not much good AA options. That is the reason why I have to bring in the more expensive AA. These guys have a range of 2800, so that's far better than the 2400 we see over here. So bring in some of these guys. However, you must note that the HE power is only 1. So these guys are more of like a Vulcan autocannon kind of units. So bring a fair bit of these guys because you will not be able to destroy enemy aircraft, especially the high quality aircraft, with only one of these guys. So just bear in mind, bring a combination rather than just a solo isolated unit. Alright, so we have gone through the tanks. Now recons as usual, bring in a ground based recon, a infantry based recon, and if possible bring in a helicopter recon. These guys are pretty versatile, especially on large maps where you might want to place one of these helicopter recons over water, over the ocean, because nowadays there are a lot of players that sneak aeroplanes and helicopters by the side of the map to snipe your CV right at the back. So use them wisely, these guys are pretty good. And the vehicles, bring in a fair bit of them because these guys are the main punch of your units. The tanks are good at holding the front line, but they are not that strong in terms of the AP power. These vehicles have AP power of 22, so these guys are pretty good at making a push at destroying the let's say T80s that your opponents may want to bring in. So bring a fair bit of them. These guys are more of like my so-called attention catching kind of units. These guys are meant to get the attention of the enemy, while my ATGM vehicles deal the main bulk of the damage. So that's the point. Now helicopters, I brought in some. These guys are more of a situational, because helicopters can only be brought in if your opponent has very little AA. So if you see your opponent bringing little AA, do capitalize on his mistake by bringing more helicopters. These guys have long range of 2600, high AP power, definitely worth a look. The planes are not amazing, but they are pretty decent. As you can tell, the range against aeroplanes is 6,300 meters, and as a result, these guys are pretty decent against other aircraft, which let's say bombers have typically about 3,000 meter range, so you can outrange the bombers and take them out from afar. The Draken, I find them as pretty good multi-purpose. They have good range against the ground and air, so use them as you see fit. These guys are very cheap at 35 deployment points a piece. Definitely worth a bring in. These guys are even cheaper than the helicopters we see over here. So just bring them in, and if necessary, just throw them away. So that's about it for my Swedish deck. I really like the Swedish deck very much. I like the holding power. I like the ATGM vehicles that can deal damage. The Swedish deck, I think, is a deck that people will easily underestimate your true strength. Use the Swedish deck wisely, and I'm sure you can catch your enemy unawares and win a victory. Do give this deck a try. I highly recommend this deck for new and veteran players alike. And do let me know how you find the deck. Leave me a message in the comments, and I will try this deck out myself in the subsequent multiplayer games. Alright, so that's about it from me, and see you guys in the next episode. Signing off.